We are live here at 𝘱𝘐. Welcome, Cossette, to what is now my second live here at 𝘱𝘐, where I get to bring in smart, sassy people who appreciate what I do, and I most definitely appreciate what you do. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, I'm going to backpedal a little and start with how you and I got connected and how we decided to do this specific talk on pre and postnatal fitness, the pelvic floor, just a lot really, in an entire comprehensive package for mama in general, right? Mm-hmm. So I am a mother myself. I have 2 kids. Today is actually my son's 9th birthday. So happy birthday to Owen. And my daughter is 11. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, going way back, I decided to focus on pre and postnatal fitness. I have been in the fitness industry for almost 30 years now, really just piecing together a lot of what I've been doing, personal training, indoor cycling, name it, and there's not a lot I haven't done at this point. But at that point in my life, I was very intrigued with pre and postnatal fitness, and I purchased a franchise called Fit for Mom. And Fit for Mom was and it still is, a comprehensive fitness program with prenatal and then a stroller program called Stroller Strides, which is a lot of what the moms out there might remember being a part of. And then there was a program called Body Back. So it was taking mother through pretty much every stage of motherhood. And the education was phenomenal. And it was a really important time in my life where I not only had gained an incredible foundation for pre and postnatal fitness, but really being a mom and how alone it can feel and what a program like that provided the community. So fast forward about 3 years after I launched that, I had my son Owen, and we were continuing with the classes. And when Owen was 9 months, I opened Revolution Indoor Cycling, now 𝘱𝘐, and times were changing for me. We kept a lot of the classes going, but I knew I really couldn't maintain them as my kids were getting older, and I had this studio. So fast forward even more, I had posted kind of a throwback to these days of pre and postnatal fitness. And the reaction that I got from the community was, what is this? This is amazing. I want you to do this again. And in my mind, it really hadn't been that long, but come to find out, all these years had come and gone, and this opportunity for mothers to connect and learn about their bodies and feel comfortable with themselves and the experiences that they were going through was no longer there. So I gathered some of my smart instructors who were now new moms, and we are pre and postnatal certified, and we relaunched the fitness program last year where you can bring your baby. And what I learned in this process was that nothing had really changed over all of these years, was that mothers still felt alone. They had questions and they needed a reason to connect. And they also needed smart fitness programming that they felt comfortable with. And so I wanted to bring the smart people that I have met over the years. One of them is you, and the fact that you focus on women's health and a lot of the issues that women face, whether they are new moms, whether they are veteran moms, for those of us who had our children a while ago, or whether their children are having children now, that there's a lot going on that never stops. So it was a very long introduction. Don't worry, it is now your turn. So please introduce yourself and we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, so I'm Cossette, and I work at 4 Pines Physical Therapy in Jackson, working primarily with, men, women, and children with pelvic floor dysfunction. But I like to think of myself as an advocate for women's health in our community. I haven't had any children of my own yet, but I really feel passionate about empowering women in all stages of their life to feel comfortable in their bodies, to feel strong, and to do whatever it is they want to do for themselves. And I think in our society, and specifically as women enter motherhood, there's a huge disconnect between the care we give others and the care we give ourselves. And I really enjoy being part of helping women give that power and that love back to themselves that they give to all the people around them in their lives.
I love that. I love that. And something that when I reached out to you to have this talk, something that you brought up was meeting mothers where they are, meeting women in general where they are. And that is something that I advocate as, a fitness professional providing classes for the masses, is that people just meet themselves where they are. And that's a lot of, once someone is pregnant, really finding that connection with their training now for maybe not a marathon, they're training for labor and delivery. And that is something that, and then of course, life after that, which is a constant marathon. So I love your approach to women's health. So let's start with, just for those of you tuning in, what we're going to do is really kind of go from, I don't want to say start to finish because we don't want to go to the very end. We really want to go to that prenatal stage, postnatal, and then really what that means. So if you're pregnant, a new mom, or again, a mom of teenagers or beyond, there's going to be something a little for everyone. And we do encourage you to make this interactive. You're welcome to ask questions. Love connecting. Hello, Laura Wright. Welcome, welcome. It's important that we're able to, bring questions to the table. So along the way, if you have questions, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, just listen in and enjoy, and hopefully we can hit some points that you have. So let's start with prenatal fitness. When a mom finds out she's pregnant, what I found, especially entering the realm of not only having my first child all those years ago, but starting to embrace this prenatal fitness. Now, the education that we follow is following ACOG guidelines. So that is the gold standard in what physicians connect with, what you connect with, and what we connect with. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and prenatal fitness in general.
Yeah, so those of you who are wondering, ACOG means the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and they do a lot of research and create this body of recommendations that are not one size fits all, but they're recommendations for people with non-complicated pregnancies without contraindications, which is pretty much most women. And it used to be thought that women are really fragile when they're pregnant and maybe exercising isn't safe beyond really gentle movements. But now we understand that whole concept of meeting a woman where she is. So the day you become pregnant, there's not a list of things you're suddenly not allowed to do, aside from, like scuba diving, for example. Wherever you are in your fitness journey, you can continue. And it's just like when you're building up to a goal, you're building up to the goal. I love how you said that. You're building up to the goal, the fitness goal of giving birth in any form. And as with any progression in training, it's a slow progression where you're monitoring how you feel along the process and not where you think you should be. And so if you're relatively fit or active going into pregnancy, I think that it's a really general, gradual progression or regression of activities that you do. So if you're lifting heavy weights, that's okay to do, so long as you don't have any symptoms of pelvic floor dysfunction or pain, and let how your body feels be your guide as you go along. Specifically in the first and second trimester, you may be able to do everything you've done before pregnancy, just with a little extra care and tuned to your body. That being said, I really feel strongly that a lot of women feel pressured to do everything and be the fittest pregnant woman in the world. And in the end, you need to practice self-care and remember that growing a human is an insane physical endeavor. And if you feel like napping and not exercising one day, that's not a character flaw. That's what you should be doing.
We always said that the changes that a mother goes through in 9 months, a woman goes through is more than most men go through in their entire life. So there are these big changes that happen, and we're just packing it all in 9 months. Now, going back to that first trimester, What I know, what I often see is that really people just don't feel great in that first trimester. That's pretty normal. So they tend to back away on activity for that reason, just because they don't feel great. And then that second trimester hits, that blood flow gets going differently, and this surge of energy happens, and people tend to come alive during that time. But really, it used to be, one of the myths was that you shouldn't, I mean, now let's go way back. You shouldn't exercise when you're pregnant. That was very old information, but now those women could go work out in the field, but they could not lift anything heavy inside the house. So obviously not exercising during pregnancy is dated information. Something else that ACOG, that is dated information, is a heart rate cursor. So it used to be, they would say, don't take your heart rate over 140, which, if you know a lot about heart rate or anything about heart rate, being a pregnant woman and getting to 140, especially if you're an athlete already, that is, a drop in the hat. So in 2002, which is already, very long time ago, that information became dated. So I don't know, do you see, what sort of myths do you see during that time coming in that people maybe are nervous about? And is that something that you deal with, or are the myths, do you feel like maybe they are true myths now and people have left them behind?
I think, like, in our community, a lot of people are really informed, but I think there is still a fair bit of fear surrounding pregnancy and what you should and shouldn't do. And then there's the other side of the spectrum, right? Women who feel incredible pressure to do too much. Mm-hmm. And so I just remind people that, ACOG does recommend a minimum of 150 minutes of exercise a week. So keeping active, even if that's gentle walking or yoga, is the minimum they recommend for a huge reduction in all sorts of risk during labor and pregnancy. That being said, you can exercise as much as you feel able to. And right. I like to empower women to, some women love CrossFit, for example, and they say, well, I guess I better quit. And I really say you should modify and do what you want to do. There's no script for the perfect exercise when you're pregnant. It's what you love to do already, and try to modify it. And so as far as myths, I definitely hear people coming in. I can't think of a specific trend, but there is fear surrounding what you're allowed to do. Like, okay, can I weightlift? Can I run? And running is one that there are many different schools of thought. I particularly feel like running is okay for certain women, right? It all depends. So if a woman doesn't have any symptoms of heaviness in the vaginal area, or pain, or urinary leakage, then I'm okay with them running for as long as they feel able.
Right. Which is great. We don't, we have progressed. So that is great to hear. I know that something that was past information that, when I started my program, it was that we shouldn't start a new program. It wasn't a good time if you already hadn't been doing it. So if you were doing a CrossFit workout, you could continue, but it wouldn't be a great time to start it. So really, it's just being mindful. That's kind of dated information. Obviously, certain workouts aren't, well, as you said, aren't great for everyone. And it's not a great time to explore big, bad workouts, but it sure is beneficial to move and keep moving as long as you can to get to that finish line, which is labor and delivery and the other side. So if there's anything else from the prenatal aspect before we move on, let me know what.
Yeah, a comment I have is, I just thought of a myth that I hear frequently. A lot of women coming into me, particularly with their first pregnancy, feel that they need to start doing Kegels or pelvic floor muscle exercises like crazy. When in fact, it's really important, especially for first-time mothers who don't have any pre-existing weakness, is more often than not, I find that they're actually really strong in their pelvic floor, and what they need for a healthy delivery is good relaxation of the pelvic floor. To be able to just think of it like any muscle, a functional bicep doesn't live in a contraction, and neither does I'm not getting that, functional pelvic floor. And so It's great to be able to do Kegels and contraction and have good endurance, but for a really a better birth experience, you need to be able to fully relax your pelvic floor, and beyond that, lengthen it. And as funny as it sounds, I often educate people on treating each bowel movement like a little mini birth practice, and trying to build that awareness of what does really relaxing and breathing into your pelvic floor feel like. Because maybe you're not weak and don't need to do Kegels all day. Maybe you need to practice that lengthening and that just awareness of the opposition and the full excursion of your pelvic floor muscles.
Oh, I like that. Any tips right now? Because after you've given birth, talking about a bowel movement is no big deal, right? So do you want to get a little more into that before we move on? I like that. I like that a lot, because I think that's good for everyone to hear.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start just with describing, for anyone that's wondering if they're doing it right, I'll describe just a good contraction of the pelvic floor. So there's 3 different layers of the pelvic floor, and they're kind of the bottom of your pelvis. And I like to actually think of the pelvic floor like a can of soda, right? So it's not just one dimensional, it's 3-dimensional, like our whole body. So the bottom of the soda is your pelvic floor. It's supporting your pelvic organs, and it's around basically around your vulva and your anus. And so it helps with pee, poop, and sex. It needs to relax and contract for both. The top of the canister is your diaphragm. So the way you breathe affects your pelvic floor, because there's a constant exchange of pressure when your lungs fill and empty of air. And then, of course, the rest of the core that functions with the pelvic floor is your abs, your ab muscles. And so I like to inhale to help relax their pelvic floor. That typically helps. It's not that you can't exhale and relax your pelvic floor or vice versa, but it's a good start, because as your diaphragm comes down, there's all of your abdominal contents gently descend as your lungs fill with air, and your pelvic floor can gently lengthen just with that pressure gradient. As you exhale, your diaphragm lifts, and so can your pelvic floor. And so a lift of the pelvic floor is a contraction. So some fun analogies I give people to help them is, imagine that you are picking up a blueberry with your vagina. So the closure is the outer layer, and the lift, or the picking up, is the inner layer that supports your organs and your baby. And so that contraction, or another one that some people love, is imagine you're slurping liquid with a straw through your vagina. So get that closure of the vaginal entrance as well as the anus, and then that lift or support. So that's a contraction. And I feel like most people are more familiar with the contraction. A relaxation really should just be your baseline when you're sitting around. And so I like to tell people to put 2 fingers in the perineum, which is the area between the anus and the vaginal opening. So if you just put 2 fingers there, if you're watching this, and try to inhale and breathe into your hand, let it all go, let your belly fill with air, and let your pelvis fill with air, so to speak. You should feel a gentle descent of the perineum. Everything should just relax and kind of come back down. And for opposition, try a Kegel. So close and lift, or pick up that blueberry, and then let it go. And then the final stage is that lengthening, and this is where the bowel movements come in, is try to lengthen as if you're pushing out a bowel movement. So if your 2 fingers are in your perineum, try to push down into your hand. It's important here when you're having a bowel movement or when you're giving birth that you don't Valsalva or hold your breath. So isn't the best way. You're just building up pressure and increasing your risk of organ prolapse and other issues. And so to try to exhale, even make a sound, or grr, or whatever sound is empowering and fun for you, that alone can just help open the pelvic floor. So there's certain sounds that help contract the pelvic floor. Interesting, because there's a connection to your glottis and just the top of your airway and your pelvic floor, because of that pressure gradient we talked about. So just one more time to kind of recap, if you're comfortable, put 2 fingers in your perineum. Inhale, try to feel it relax and descend. Exhale, try to close and lift, and say the word hut. As you say hut, you might feel your abdominals come in, and you might feel your pelvic floor lift. Now say ha, and try to gently lengthen, and see if you feel that length. If you can't quite feel this just from this quick tutorial, that's a time when it might be helpful to come in and get some hands-on assistance. But that's every time you have a bowel movement, you can think about that trying to gently let your anus open and breathing into it, building a little pressure in your abdomen, but not holding your breath. So
I like that. All right, ladies, you got that? Blueberries, water, and noises.
Yeah.
We can handle that. We can handle it. All right, so let's continue on. All right, we've had our baby, and I know that in here, there is a lot of pressure for moms to feel like they need to get back as soon as they can. Now, part of it is mental because we know how good fitness makes us feel, but I don't think anyone can truly prepare for what your body feels like after childbirth until you are there. So there is a disconnect between what your mind wants to get back to and really what your body is craving to make sure that you heal properly. So in here, we always say, going back to those ACOG guidelines, we really want you to get your doctor's checkup at 6 weeks to know that you're healing correctly before you come back in. I do have moms that have dipped their toe in the water a little earlier, and that is honestly something that I know that you and I have talked about, where it's really up to them, but we're always going to tell you 6 weeks, because I don't really want anyone in here pushing themselves too hard or being tempted when it's not necessary. So I would love to discuss like that period of being a new mom and feeling that pressure, and really what's going on in the body after you've given birth, and beyond what is going on at home, the craziness of actually caring for your baby and how exhausted you are, but the healing that is going on as well. So let's go ahead and visit that.
Totally. So just some quick stats from the literature is that a C-section scar, if you had a C-section delivery, you're cutting through your abdominal muscles, and it only has about 50% of the tensile strength at 6 weeks. And so while that's good healing, you have to remember that that's 50% of the tensile strength as your abs contract and along the scar that you had previously. And so that takes a lot of respect, and in some ways a little more time than a vaginal delivery, depending on the trauma associated with the vaginal delivery. And then with a vaginal birth, typically everything is a little bit stretched through that whole urogenital hiatus, and that's normal and healthy to push a baby out. However, that recoil takes time of all the tissue, and if you push it too quickly, that can lead to other problems. And so just keep in mind that, again, the research shows healing time for the vaginal delivery is 4 to 6 months. That stretch is coming back a little closer to normal. Doesn't mean you can't do anything in the interim, but that's just a good thought to keep in mind when you consider returning to really high intensity activities. And so when you're thinking about what to do immediately post-birth in those first 6 weeks, it doesn't mean you can't do anything, but returning to a fitness class where there's pressure is probably a little too much, considering all the healing that your body's doing from this very large, we could call it an injury, even though it's healthy and normal. And you think in our town, we're so familiar with ACL return to activity protocols. And at 6 weeks post ACL, nobody's asking to go running, right? And I would argue that a birth is a larger thing for your body to go through than an ACL surgery. And yet a lot of women feel pressure to be perfect. 6 weeks, like this magical bell rings. And so I just want to remind you all that that's not the case. And wherever you are, you're perfect and you're normal. And the other thing that we know just in sport performance in general is if you're running at a relative energy deficiency, you're going to perform worse and have a higher risk for injury. And by relative energy deficiency, I'm talking about breastfeeding and lack of sleep, for example. And so there's nothing wrong with prioritizing sleep over exercise in the early months, or sleep over laundry or a clean house, for example. So
I have no problem with that. None. That is great advice. And definitely, having knowing even just at the time when I was focusing on the pre and postnatal aspect, but also, slightly being a hypocrite myself, as most fitness professionals are. We want to tell everyone what to do, but actually doing it ourselves is a totally different story.
Yep.
I felt like I needed to maintain, a certain level of fitness, of, on personal energy. And it wasn't that way. It wasn't that way. And figuring out how to honor myself still to this day and where my body is, it's challenging. But when you do it, I find that there is definitely a bit more peace instead of comparing and expecting, a lot of, I think it's very common that women, put a lot of pressure on themselves with the weight gain, for instance. And really, the weight gain is so natural, and to embrace what's going on. There are only so many things you can be in control of. So the more choices, great choices that we make as through that pre and post time and forever, it's really, we'll be better off for it. So I think that's great advice. I love the ACL, and that's really the pregnant athlete. It's really like when you train, when you have an injury, we take care of ourselves. And being pregnant is not a sickness, but it's definitely a change in the body. And when we can embrace what's going on and take care of it and make good choices, we prepare for that labor and delivery. We prepare for being a mother, and then everything else beyond that. So I love that analogy. I thought that was great. Let's go over something that is pretty common is the diastasis recti, that a lot of separations happen, and maybe how people can identify if they've gone through that and what advice you can offer, because it is very common. I don't have statistics on how common, but I know it's very common. Mm-hmm. So whatever you can share.
Yeah, so diastasis is the separation of basically down the middle of your abdomen. You think about the six pack, there's always a ligament down the middle. It's called the linea alba. And when a woman carries a child, it naturally stretches, and that's a healthy adaptation. Diastasis is just the separation of the two abdominal layers. And what they're finding now is some nulliparous women, or women who have never had children, and men as well, also can experience this. There's a lot of really fear-based information on the internet about diastasis. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing to remember is that, first of all, it's healthy and normal adaptation. It's just trying to figure out how to not exacerbate it once you deliver your baby, and try to help those abdominal layers come back together. And more importantly than coming back together is being able to generate force or communicate from side to side, left to right. And so as you are, even during pregnancy, you can begin to build awareness of diastasis, and some signs and symptoms that you're working a little too hard. So essentially, when you're thinking about it, consider it just like the soda pop can, right? Where I was talking about this pressure gradient from top to bottom with air. You never want a huge increase in intra-abdominal pressure when you're trying to recover from or prevent a diastasis, because that's just gonna push the two layers farther apart. So you want to think about breathing through motion. So exhale on exertion, I tell people, as a general rule. Again, you're not going to mess yourself up if you don't do this every time, like some things online say. Right. But as a general rule, it's good to try to figure out how to brace those deeper abdominals. Mm-hmm. So we can try right now some experiential. Everyone put your hands on your lower belly, just below your belly button, a little out toward your hip bones. And as you inhale, try to breathe into your hands. And as you exhale, try to gently feel your belly button come in toward your spine, and maybe your hands will gently come together. So when you're doing a difficult activity, and that ranges from person to person, right? So that could be sitting up in bed, or that could be doing a double leg lower. You should always see the tensegrity maintained across the two sides of your abdominal wall, and know what we call coning or doming, which is the puffing out. And sometimes you can see the two layers apart with some air in between. And that just means that your intra-abdominal pressure isn't being well controlled, and you're not getting that good translation of force from side to side. So that pressure has to go somewhere, and it's going to be pushing the two sides apart more. The good news is, if that happens again once in a while, it doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, you've messed yourself up. It just means maybe that was a little too difficult for me today, or B, maybe I can just try a different strategy. So if you try to exhale, add a little kegel, a little lower abdominal draw in to that movement, and see if that helps you be able to do something without doming. So during pregnancy, you can constantly kind of look down and see if that's happening or not, and try to work on activities that don't promote that. And then postpartum as well, that's one thing you can really work on in those first 6 weeks, is just that gentle connection. Can you exhale? Can you pull in your lower abs? Maybe do a little lift of the pelvic floor. Get that canister working without that holding of pressure and that pushing out. Another tactile feedback technique that I have that a lot of women really love is to put a towel or an exercise band around your lower abs. So it would be wrapped around each of my hands as one of the towels, and you gently pull. So you're approximating the two layers, and you're not actually mushing them back together, but you're teaching your body how to gently draw in on either side. So hopefully those little tips with diastasis are helpful. And again, sometimes you do need the guidance of coming to a pelvic PT to work through that if you're struggling to find that connection.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So what we've talked about really in those first 6 weeks too, is that fitness doesn't mean necessarily what you were doing before. Mm-hmm. Be kind to yourself, choose your movement wisely. And then also at that 6 weeks, start to engage in activity that makes sense for you. So I know that we talked a bit about that, how there is no one menu for each mother. So if you want to dip into that a little.
Yeah. And so a lot of times people come in to see me and say, okay, I have little diastasis, or my pelvic floor, I feel disconnected to it. What should I do? And my answer is always, what do you want? Fits all exercise. If you care about lifting weights, that's going to look different than if you care about running. And we're going to build back toward that. And so I like to try to incorporate the pelvic floor and the abs into more functional movements, rather than just thinking strictly, okay, I'm going to use my pelvic floor while I do this little ab motion and then I'm done. Really, in the end, your pelvic floor should work reflexively for you throughout the day. And so if we can retrain that reflex by, okay, let's pick up your baby and think a little bit about how to engage your pelvic floor, how to engage your lower abs, how to breathe properly, and do it in a way that feels good and empowering to your body, building toward the activity you want to do, then we can cater that to anything, right? Mm-hmm. So if you love yoga, let's figure out how to use your pelvic floor and your lower abs into a progression toward what you love to do. And that looks different for everyone, and the progression speed looks different for everyone as well. And I think a little self-compassion goes a long ways.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I know we need to lighten up on ourselves a little, especially coming out of the time. We haven't really even visited what, being someone who is going through the extra stress of the quarantine that we were just on, coming out of it back into daily life looks different. So there's a lot of added stress as of recently that is added on. So I think having compassion for ourselves that, there's no such thing as normal anymore right now, at least right now, right? We're figuring out what's new. So before we kind of move on from that, anything else you want to add? I think compassion is always a great place to end, meeting us where we are in that moment, where our body is, which really comes to every year after delivery, every month, every day, just meeting your body where it is. You know, after baby, in theory, we can be leaner and stronger than ever, but those times come and go. And sometimes I will self-confess a TMI, which if you come to my class, you already know I'm TMI. I'm a storyteller. A few years ago, I dipped into pelvic floor. And what I discovered was, because I'm great at telling everyone how to do things, I really wasn't taking care of myself. And what I discovered about my own pelvic floor was, like, 'cause I have some hip issues. So my right hip, I tend to favor my right leg, and I've got a lot of issues. And what we discovered with my pelvic floor was that my left side of my pelvic floor was strong and muscular. I don't know if that's the right word. It was developed. And then the right side was like, which is really my right side in general. So I thought it was so fascinating and really a great lesson that there are probably issues that I should have visited years ago, but here I am all these years later, that you're constantly working on yourself and there's constant issues. Once you've given birth, your body's gone through it. So let's talk about like what you see years after the babies are born.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of women, there's many years of neglect or self-denial in which you don't really think about the way that your body feels because you're caring for another human. And that's okay in a lot of ways. But I see a lot of women who come to me for the first time seeing a pelvic therapist or taking care of their painful areas or their problems or being educated about their body, particularly their pelvic floor, 20 years postpartum. And so I always tell women that once postpartum, always postpartum. And once you're right, your body has transformed in a really cool, beautiful way because you've done a really impressive athletic physical feat. And again, I think it comes back to self-compassion, but you know, it takes a while to break habits and rebuild the way that we move every day. And just trying to bring a little bit of awareness to your core and realizing that your pelvic floor is the foundation for a ton of other movements. So it can manifest as low back pain or hip pain or these changes of places in our body that we find stability because our bodies are really good at adapting and trying to get a task done at all costs. So I think throughout the lifespan, we have to respect and honor the fact that birth has made a lasting impact on our bodies as women. And also that things can change too. So sometimes women don't really have very many pelvic floor issues, for example, or prolapse immediately after. And then maybe because of some years of neglect or gravity or whatever, in their 50s or 60s or 70s. And I just want to say that's okay.
But it's also okay, never think that you can't reach out. So funny story is I have been obsessed with the trampoline. I bought a mini trampoline, a fitness trampoline. And if you don't think I'm going to start trampoline classes, you're crazy because I'm in love with them. And every woman I talk to who talks about peeing their pants and like, I'm not getting on that trampoline. I'm going to pee. And I think to myself, you don't have to, even though you had kids, like it still can be visited. So once these trampoline classes come out, if you think you're going to pee, let's get that problem solved. We know some people around town who can help you out, right? I think we know someone.
I totally agree. And if there was one platform or catchphrase I had, it would be like, I'd want no woman in Jackson to feel like they can't jump on the trampoline with their kids, because that's crazy to think just a year ago or 20 years ago, you can't jump or do whatever you want without leaking, because that's absolutely incorrect. And it's just a matter of slowly learning how to use your pelvic floor in a progressive way.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think there's like a normalization of that leaking during activity that doesn't, just because it's common doesn't mean it has to be the norm. And there is help you can get and some patterns you can change.
Yes. And when in doubt, wear black pants, right? That's why we have black pants. So with that frame of mind, I think we can wrap this up safely with talking about what we have going on here at VIM and how happy I am to welcome you to the team, and not, to tell you the truth, I approached you about doing this talk before I realized that I had to get you to be a part of our team. So tomorrow, we are relaunching what the Mommy and Me type program. It's going to be called Vim Mama, and it's our outdoor boot camp with Carrie Cruz, who's pre and postnatal certified. So you're going to have exercises that are going to fit no matter what stage of pregnancy or motherhood you're in. You get to bring your little ones, stroller age preferably. If they cry, do not worry. You are in good hands. You need to stop and breastfeed. You are in good hands. This is about a safe space, coming and connecting with moms and really just doing movement that's great for you. If your baby cries and you're like, they're not going to sit in a stroller, you take them out, you put them in. This is all about just getting out and being able to social distance at the same time and get to know new moms and connect with ones you already know. So along the way, when I got your beautiful bio, it talked about you being a Pilates instructor. And I said, it's time, while we're working on this beautiful program, let's pull you in. And I would love for you to talk about what your goal is. It's Friday, first of all. We're starting this Friday at 7:30, and it's going to be called Vim Mama Mat Pilates. So big, broad range. Let's go ahead and wrap up with you giving us a little details about what you've got planned.
Yeah, so this is going to be a mat Pilates class for pre and postnatal women of any age. It's totally inclusive. So if you're 40 years postnatal and you're interested, you're welcome. But the emphasis will be on trying to build awareness of the pelvic floor and the core, and to empower women to be in their pre and postnatal bodies to the best of their ability. And I think that there will be a lot of solidarity in talking to other women who have been through similar experiences, and knowing that you're not alone, and that whatever you're going through, it's okay and it's normal, and there's other people there. So I think that will be really beautiful to bring a group of women together to honor their bodies and work toward becoming stronger and having that good foundation of pelvic floor and core and overall strength.
Oh, I'm so excited. So again, that is Friday at 7:30. That starts this week, so you can get online and reserve. We've got the boot camp where you can bring your babies along, starting tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I hope I said that right. I'll get that information up on the website. But Cossette, you are a gem. This was so valuable, and people will be able to listen to this for days to come. I know we have to get you to work. So thank you. Where can we find you when we need to hunt you down for pelvic floor therapy?
Yeah, so I'm at 4 Pines on Highway 89 across from 𝘱𝘕𝘴𝘃, or you can chat with me at Vim any Friday morning at 7:30.
Excellent. Tell our friends over at 4 Pines hi. And thank you so much for your time. And thank you for listening in, Jackson Hole and beyond. And we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.